First and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for making a donation to the Seacoast Repertory Theater. Obviously, it's become a very important part of both mine and Elise's life, and so we wanted to say thank you in a special way by showing you my carnitas. This recipe actually comes from America's Test Kitchen. I worked there one time and they happened to be making these and they are ridiculous. So I figured I'd show you how to do it. To start, we're gonna need some adobo that you can get at pretty much any grocery store, some chili pepper, kind of same deal. Then, because we don't just want spice, we also want depth of flavor, we went and got some South African smoked spice from Trader Joe's. Ordinarily, I would just use some chipotle powder. However, I didn't have any and neither did Trader Joe's. So, smoked South African, we'll see how this goes. Then oregano, a pretty common Mexican spice, and then of course cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, guess what? No big deal, you can just not use it. So the meat, I have 6 pork chops here, that's 3 and 3, because math, and usually I might use something larger like a pork roast or a pork shoulder or pork butt, but because I'm making a smaller batch, this is just going to be easier for me to use. For this recipe, we're also going to use an Instapot, so there you go, look at that, handy little Instapot pot, double pot, pot squared. Okay, that's just terrible. Anyway, I'm going to be putting everything in there. If you don't have an Instapot, it's no big deal, we can review how to do that later. So I'm going to quarter a couple onions. I believe I use 2 in this case, but really you can use up to 3, 4, go crazy, who really cares? They're onions, they're just going to add additional flavor. And now I'm going to cut up the meat. These are pork chops. That's what pork chops look like. You'll notice along the edge we have this strip of fat. Now that's not a big deal, we're going to trim it off because otherwise during the braising process it's going to get sinewy and kind of gross. So now that I've trimmed it off, I'm going to just chop these up into roughly 1-inch cubes. That's just going to help the braising process along, otherwise you're going to be braising for a lot longer, especially if you're doing it on the stovetop or in the oven. I use the Instapot because I can get this whole thing braised in roughly 45 minutes. This is me cutting up more meat. Isn't it exciting? Look at me go. Hurrah! 1-inch cubes. There we go. All the meat and the onions. Last thing I'm going to do is put in a little bit of garlic. I obviously want to get some seasoning in there. You can either use fresh garlic cloves. I just use the mince because it's easier. Okay, cool. I forgot to take the plastic thing off. Anyway, I'm going to set that aside and not look embarrassed. Next, I'm going to just hit it with some of the spices that we've already set aside. So chili powder, a lot of chili powder. Obviously, that's going to be the predominant? That's going to be the main flavor. It's going to be the most exciting flavor. As well, we put in a little bit of adobo. Again, this is kind of a garlicky, salty flavor. Next, cilantro, because apparently we like things to taste like soap. And then lastly, some oregano. So you can see I'm being very precise with my measurements here. Because in the end, I'm gonna dump a ton of water in on there, and that way I'm giving it that kind of braising liquid flavor. So we are gonna be using the braising liquid later on in the recipe, and that's what kind of makes it delicious and more depth. I'm adding just enough water to basically cover up all the pork. The onions will float up, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. So I have everything in there, and now I'm gonna throw it in the Instant Pot for about 45 minutes. And onions, am I right? They're gonna play an important role. So we already have the ones that we quartered and are braising. Now we actually just wanna dice this one up to throw in during the sauteing process towards the end of the recipe. You can see I'm very good at chopping onions. This is in real time. I no way sped up this footage. And peeling onion, chop, 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 chop. If you're not familiar with how to chop an onion, you should really be familiar with chopping an onion. And now we want to go over to the stove because magic of movie making. And in reality, an hour has actually passed. So here we are at my stove. You can see the braised pork. You can kind of break it up with tongs, but what they actually recommend is a potato masher. Surprisingly, this works really well when you're not doing it over hot oil. So yeah, move your pan. So there we go. So it's all broken up into smaller pieces. I've got a pan on medium high with oil. I'm waiting for it to shimmer, and then I'm just going to dump it in. I've taken everything out of the braising liquid and I set aside roughly a cup of liquid. You can always save more. Honestly, it's great for flavoring. And if you feel like it's getting dried out anytime during the sauteing process, you can just top it off with some braising liquid. So the pan is hot, and here's what it sounds like when you put the pork in. That's also why I didn't do the audio live, because it sounds terrible. The whole goal here is to really get some crunchy goodness on the outside pieces of the pork. So I might have even already put in too much, but really you just want to get nice and hot oil and give it a stir until it starts to brown up. And then you definitely, again, want to keep the salt content high, so keep putting some salt in. All right, yep, some more salt, some oregano. You really want to keep seasoning. The whole idea is that you have this really solid flavor. So oregano, adobo, garlic, chili powder, just keep putting it in until it smells like you want to just lick this pan. Don't lick the pan because it's incredibly hot and that would hurt. So I hope I don't have to tell you that. Now that I have some good crunchy crispiness going on, it's time to add in the onions. Now at this point, I do want to drop the heat down. I didn't because I'm an idiot, but you should drop the heat down to medium low. Otherwise, you're gonna potentially torch the tomato sauce when you add that in, and nobody wants torched tomatoes. It's just not going to taste delicious, and the goal here is to make it taste delicious. Next, we're going to add about a tablespoon of garlic, and the idea is I'm going to just drop this in and wait for the smell to hit me. You'll get this really strong aroma of garlic, and that's your sign to dump in the tomato sauce. So keep stirring it along. Obviously, again, we're on the lower heat at this point, not in the video because stupid, but yep, dumping in the tomato sauce. So now I'm gonna start to get some of the crispiness on the bottom of the pan off. I'm gonna start getting some of that flavor infusing throughout. Then I'm gonna dump in about a cup of the braising liquid. So now I've got a ton of liquid, as you can see, and we don't want that much because otherwise it'll just saturate everything. So now what we're gonna do is really just intensify the flavor by letting it sit for a good amount of time. I'm gonna keep adding in seasonings like the adobo, the oregano, and really a good amount of chili pepper at this time because you really wanna make sure that's the forward flavor. And then of course, I'm gonna take a chance and use this smoked South African spices. The big idea there is the smoke, right? So chipotle powder will obviously have the smoke as well, but the smoke gives it a nice depth of flavor that you wouldn't ordinarily get just from using chili powder. Chili powder, as you can see here, is going to be the main spice. You want to get that really deep, good redness that you're seeing right there, and just keep stirring it along, adding the spices as you see fit. If you're someone who really likes garlic, add more garlic, like I just did. If you're someone who really likes, spice, you can go crazy with the spice. Okay, come on, just come off. Will you please? Okay, yeah. So then you're just going to crank this a couple times. I probably could have done it even more, but hesitant. But yeah, it smells pretty good and it's smoky, so that's nice. And then I'm just going to put the top, goddamn everything. All right, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. So like I said, while we do want to have a lot of that liquid, we want it to simmer down and reduce just to make sure that the flavor is going to be enriched by it. So here we have the current liquid, and through the magic of movie making, we're going to jump ahead a little bit of time, probably about an hour, and we can see that it's actually reduced by about half. I'm going to still keep stirring it. I want a little bit of that liquid because otherwise, when I throw it in the microwave tomorrow or anytime, it's just going to kind of boil down and be dry. So taste test and delicious.